Whoa, hello? Am I on? Yeah. Hi, welcome back. So yes, everyone, please put your hands together for the very brilliant Mia Bays.
Thank you.
How are you, Mia?
I'm all right, actually. I am preparing to wind down my tenure, so I can't get fired, so I can tell you everything and spill the secrets because I leave in October. So I'm in a transitional space. It's interesting, being de-institutionalised and becoming free.
Ooh, I'm quite excited to get into that. So how did this all come about? What was your kind of introduction to the filmmaking space to begin with?
Well, I found a great job in film when I was 19, and I just worked on a film called Icy Buildings Fall Like Lightning by a wonderful author called Kieran Goddard, and he calls it public luxury, which is so he thanks at the end of the film all the free school meals, all the teachers, all of the after school clubs, all of the access that working class kids got to be where he got to, which he went to Cambridge. I didn't go to Cambridge, but I got somehow a door opened for me and I got a job, and then I just never left. And I was a working class kid. I didn't really realise how unusual that was until probably about 10 or something years into my career, and realised not really many people sounded like me. And so my mum had taken me to the cinema every week since I was about 4. I was raised by a single mum and on benefits, and went to comprehensive, didn't go to film school, didn't go to uni, didn't do any of those things. The kind of great thing about film, I still think this is possible, but we can argue about this because it's not always possible for everyone, is that it is egalitarian. If you can just get in and you've got something and you have a passion, like there are certain places which are still level. I don't think it's as level perhaps as it was, and we can get into that. Perhaps part of my passion is to make it level, and I spent my career doing that because I recognise how privilege doesn't make you talented, actually, and often the people with the most trauma, let's say, even, and often the people who've struggled the most often have the best stories and the most unusual gaze. So we can dig into that. But yeah, that's it. I've spent 5 years holding public office, and that's how I do it, and the films that we make, all of those kind of thread back to kind of my origin story, I guess.
So when you got your first job, what were you doing?
I was a PA, so I just worked for a managing director of a company. She ran her own company. It was a family business. They're now all the Everyman cinemas, but they were like 5 incredible cinemas in North London and Angel, Haverstock Hill, Baker Street, and she ran an independent distribution business. So she had like loads of really kind of raucous, like real genre-bending stuff, like Poison, Todd Haynes' first film, which I think is the first film, kind of 18 certificate film to have an erection in it and get released in regular cinemas. And that was like 1992. And John Waters, they'd released all of that kind of real, like, iconoclastic work. And so it was an amazing place to start. Yeah. I'd never seen films like that before. My mum took me to see films like Yentl. So it was a bit of a shock, but it was a great shock. Yeah. Like, all the scope of cinema was there.
So did you ever want to write films, or?
I have written one film that stars Ben Whishaw, so I had a little foray into writing. Yeah, that Tim Walker, the photographer, directed. That was sort of a bit through convenience, and I've co-directed a film. I've made a film about the Backstreet Boys, which was the Backstreet Boys solving the conundrum of how can you possibly be a man in a boy band, because it was about them coming back together. So it was like a big existential crisis, which was kind of fun to follow. And so, so I have had creative forays, but broadly I've kind of worked across every bit of the ecosystem. I see myself, I identify now really more as a creative producer, creative exec producer.
And how have you seen the industry change whilst you've been in it? Because how long have you been working in the industry?
35 years. So Parental Guidance, I'm probably old enough to be your parent, so it's probably
It's
quite,
not like,
we'll pitch it like that for this session. Yeah, long time, so since I was a teenager. And, well, I guess in some ways, I think I would say, you know, I'd identified as an activist for quite a long time, a cultural activist, and a lot of that was spent, before I got this job, kind of really being angry about how uninclusive our industry was, and I was particularly focusing on gender equity in film, particularly around writers, directors, producers, you know, who's telling the story and the female gaze. But I mean, before that, I've really been activated by that for a long time, and so I think that's got better, I think, because it has, people are now very aware that, and like all of our funding, we have targets for equity, diversity, inclusion. We have a UK-wide target to decentralise our funding away just from London. Like, try living somewhere else and making movies. It's really hard. It's okay if you're in Wales, in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Ireland, because you've got your own national fund. But if you're not in London, you're from England, it's really hard. So we look at that sort of stuff a lot. So I think that's got better. I think the whole industry's been turned around by Me Too, Time's Up.
Do you think it has
Black
had
Lives
effect?
Matter. Yeah, for sure it has, because it made people be accountable. But you know, if you're running a commercial fund, they don't care. They don't care. So it's our job to care and discover the talent that might go on to direct Netflix shows and studio movies and whatever else, or there may be people who stay in the indie sector because that's where they're most comfortable. But yeah, that's our job. So, you know, making a film like My Father's Shadow, making a film like Pillion, making films like Brides, Nadia Falls, directorial debut, Daisy May Hudson's, Lollipop, you know, that's our job. It really is our job. As well as supporting established filmmakers like Shane Meadows. We just supported his new film. He hasn't made a film in 13 years. He's been making television, but he's a national treasure. He still needs us too. So, you know, it's our job to be aware of that.
Right, so tell me how the fund process works, because I think we're all a bit confused with how you get funding to make a film in the UK.
So the first thing to understand about, so all the public funds are, we're a national fund, BFI, Filmmaking Fund, and through us we have a kind of structure that supports the whole filmmaking career path. So from BFI Network, which is early, short form. If you're non-fiction, you go to BFI Doc Society, which is short form and features. Development sits with them too, and production funding for non-fiction, and immersive. We've also got an immersive fund. You can come to us for production and development funding. And then we also fund labs. I'll probably come back to that, because that's a sort of another way that filmmakers can be supported through development and not have to come through us. So I'll come back to that. So broadly, the public funds are us, the other national funds like Film Cymru in Wales, Screen Scotland, Northern Ireland Screen Ireland and Ireland, and then the commissioners are BBC Film 4. We are not commissioners, so people get quite confused and think that if you're not on our radar, or we're not kind of tapping you on the shoulder and talent scouting, that we're not interested. We can't do that. So that's not how we work. With the commissioners, that's actively what they do. So they have to, you know, they're an end user. They're taking rights. We don't. We're purely investing equity. We're high risk, i.e. we're not necessarily looking to recoup our money, because it's national lottery. So national lottery is good cause funding. So it's absolutely designed to be there where the commercial sector isn't. So that means it's specifically designed for early career, it's designed for risk, it's designed for films that the commercial sector might be a bit scared of on paper. They might be interested later, like a pillion, for instance, or a kneecap, but up front they're not going to be there 100%. So that's our job to fill that gap. So you have to have a producer to apply to us. If for short form, for short films, you have to have a producer. For early development fund under network, which is for treatments and small bits of money for treatments and taking your first feature through a development process, you don't have to have a producer. To come to us to fund production or development, you have to have a producer to apply. So they have to be a UK producer with a limited company. You don't necessarily have to have loads of experience. You could just have one credit, and that could just be a short, or you could come through untraditional routes like artist filmmaking, music video, promos, blah.
So you could just do one music video?
Yeah. If you're coming into development, yeah. If you're coming in for production, we might suggest you pair up with someone who's got a bit more experience on an EP. But basically, we look at absolutely every application, whoever it comes from. You don't need to be known to us. The whole point is that we're transparent and fair and clear, so everyone gets treated absolutely the same, which drives established filmmakers mad because they think, "Don't you know who I am? I've had 5 features in Cannes," and like we don't care. You know, in a way, like of course we know who you are. You don't need us, is the answer. So we're here for people who haven't yet got that level of access.
So during your 5 years, which you're coming to an end of, what's been the hardest film to kind of get over the line, would you say?
They're all challenging at the moment. I mean, how many people are trying to make films here? Is everyone? Yeah, so they're all challenging in a way, whether you're trying to make a short and not managing to go through the public fund route because there's not that much money for it, to like developing your first feature or producing your first feature. They're all hard. The money's scarce, you know. We only make 12 features a year for production in terms of fiction. And yeah, they're all challenging. I mean, we don't make decisions based on what's going to be hardest. I mean, where we like creatively assess the every part of the package, really. So we go, you know, what's the previous work look like, and what do we think of the script, and have we developed it or not? Either is fine, both are welcome. It doesn't matter if we've developed it or not. We look at whether or not, for production, we look at is who else is funding it, and often we do make sure that we're not just funding films with BBC and Film 4 attached, because if we were, you would get a really small number of tastemakers deciding what British films get made. So films like Kneecap, films like Lollipop, Brides, what else recently, were not The Incomer, which just won the next prize in Sundance, which is a Scottish debut. None of those had broadcaster money. They were us and then the other national fund and then equity, basically. So we help the films get funded as much as we possibly can. We'll do intros, we'll help do anything we can to kind of help close that finance. Sometimes that means the budget might need looking at, or we'll help with casting. We'll do everything we possibly can to get the films supported. All of them get funded, but often, you know, our commitment might last a year or more before it converts.
And once you've kind of got the funding, or you've got the BFI funding down, do you withdraw from the project, or are you very much still across it whilst it's going into development?
So our team, we have people who work across every part of the process. So we have creative execs who are really strong on development and that's supporting that process. As I said, we're not commissioners, so if you want to tear up the notes and put them in the bin, you can, but they're not a set of instructions. It's a framework to help you have some fresh eyes, some of which could be a kind of varied viewpoint of an audience that will help you bring some bring a kind of point of difference. Often people are, especially with debuts, that often can be years in development in your head and in your life, and it comes into the world in quite complicated ways sometimes. So sometimes you need fresh kind of critical friends, let's say. That's how we would call what we would personify ourselves as, critical friends. And that also goes across the production process too. So you'll be assigned an exec producer and a creative exec, and they sort of help across the process once the film's in production. Then we have someone who looks after sales and distribution, who helps get international sales on board, helps with distribution, festival strategy, release strategy, all of that side. And then we have a production team who are across every aspect of the production from a kind of physical below the line perspective.
When you're going through the applications, and you see ones that you're really interested in, how do you see commercial viability in like more riskier stories?
Yeah, commerciality is thankfully, not one of our criteria. So we will often look at that's one of our priorities. So if on our fund guidelines, if you go to there's the Discovery Fund and the Impact Fund, the guidelines are the same for both production funds and also for development. And you will see the priorities which steer our decisions. So one is equity, diversity, inclusion. One is UK-wide, i.e. where is everyone from? Where is this film set? What is it doing to speak to perhaps underrepresented areas, underrepresented, marginalised communities? Creative risk is one of our priorities. Impact is one of our priorities. You don't have to meet all of those. It could be that you're doing something really out there, and that's kind of what we would encourage under kind of creative risk and impact. The impact could be really high because you're doing something really special and different. So our job is to not fund films that are obviously commercially viable, because that's what the commercial sector's there for.
How did you, I'm really obsessed with Pillion. I think it's so brilliant. Like, what was that like, kind of being part of the process of a film like that? Because I think that's I don't know if anyone would have expected it to be as successful as it was. Yeah,
that was just such a standout script, and I'm a big fan of adaptation. We've done quite a few recently, and I think that underlying novel, Box Hill, which I actually haven't read, but I understand it's quite different. And I think as a jumping off point, often someone who's really thought about a story and then handing that over to someone to adapt is kind of a real special union. We've just done it with IC Buildings Fall Like Lightning as well. And so I think he took quite a lot of really special creative liberties with that, Harry, in the adaptation. And I think very much encouraged by BBC, who developed that. And I understand that they found the book and sent it to him, actually. And
they put it together?
Yes, they.
Really?
Well, I think Eva Yates, who runs BBC Film, just was looking out for something for Harry, or just knew that he might spark to this. So actually that's really interesting kind of way round. Like sometimes that can happen. And so when we read that, we came on board later in production, and we had supported Harry, his shorts, Wren Boys, under BFI Network. So everyone was excited about what he was going to do for his debut. And when we read that, it was just so obvious. Also, when you met him to talk about it, because we always interview when we shortlist, we give people a chance to kind of pitch. And it was just obvious that he was going to do something that kind of brought out the tenderness of that. Because on paper, obviously, a film about BDSM, it's quite surprising that it's tender and actually soulful, and that you're not laughing at the lead character. And it's weirdly four-quadrant, i.e. appeals to everyone, that film, because it's very specific.
My mum.
Oh, no, really? Mum didn't? No. Okay, sorry about that, Mum.
Not a fan of that one scene. No.
Okay.
No.
Because it was interesting, because I watched it with really mixed crowds, and I was really amazed how much it played. and yeah, which was kind of interesting to me.
Has everyone seen Pillion? I feel like I should usually do reading before the talk so that everyone's brought up to date.
No spoilers. Yeah,
No
sorry if you
spoilers.
have. Well, it's still kind of beautifully surprising because it's a drama, and so it's not like there's big reveals. You have to feel it. It puts you in both of the characters' shoes, I think, or maybe shoes isn't the right piece of outfit. Yeah.
So you're coming to the end of BFI time. Were you always going to do just 5 years because it was a fixed term, the first person to have a fixed term there? So you never are up for doing it another one?
No, I really subscribe to creative renewal. I think it's a public office. It's the largest open access fund in the UK. You know, I'm responsible for £16 million a year. That's a lot. 5 years holding that kind of rather big bank balance is enough.
Trump and just keep going.
Yeah, no, not my style, really. I always think, yeah, get out while you can. Like knowing when to end. I was always good at that in relationships. So I feel like I've carried that through. Always just know, always leave them wanting more, as the old showbiz adage goes. Yeah, no, I think creative renewal is really healthy. I start to see it in other people who've been in jobs too long, where you start to think like I'm a big fan of beginner's mind, a kind of Buddhist principle where you don't go in, even if you're very experienced, go in not thinking and just listen and absorb and then bring some wisdom and experience to that. But you know, it's very particular. Each job is and each experience is different, so you can't possibly know until you're there, right? But the longer you are in it, the more you'll I see people start to get a bit cynical or a bit jaded or like they know, and I always think that's the time at which.
How does that work for long-time directors then, who've been in the game for so long?
Well, ... I just think, I think it's with public office, it's just like, it's a duty to pass the mantle on to somebody else, really. I think it's different if you're running different funds, commissioners, it's a different structure. For us, for a public fund, it's just a good, healthy thing that you pass it on to someone else who's got a different perspective, different strategies, different contacts, etc.
So what's happening next? Because I've read a bit about it, but it'd be good to hear from you.
Yeah, so Dogma is back. So Dogma 95, as I'm sure the film fans and film students in the room would know, was a movement from the Danes in the 90s. That was a particularly kind of technological revolution. It was much more about digital cameras and kind of post principles and a manifesto that was about just kind of get out and do it, and it was a lot about early career. And this new one was launched last year, Dogma 25, and by a different set of Danish filmmakers, underscored by Zentropa, who's the production company behind both movements. And I was very struck when I read the new manifesto, because it's about, you have to handwrite the script, you can't use the internet in the creative process, everything in the film has to be borrowed, nothing can be new, the crew has to be 10 people maximum.
As in costume would be borrowed. I
Yep.
don't know why I'm honing in on that one.
Yep. everything. So this one is much more kind of human-centered. It's almost like anti-algorithm. It's going back to the basics. It's for established filmmakers who need to reclaim their love of the form. And so I read about it, and I just kept thinking, God, that's really interesting. I think I know some people who need that. And it just kind of kept ruminating, and then I met Zentropa in Berlin this year and said, what about a British version? I've got some ideas as to who, and they said, that's really interesting, I'd love that. And then we just got moving, and I talked to a few people I just know needed it, and that I was right. As soon as I showed them the manifesto, like the last principle is make every film like it's your last. And I think that sort of struck established people who are kind of, in some way, it's quite hard to maintain a career. Not quite, it's very hard to maintain a career. And the kind of more seasoned you get, the kind of more trauma you've developed as you go. Even if you look like a success, it's quite isolating. So, and the point of the program is that it's for 5, to start anyway, it's 5 established filmmakers, and they all support each other. And
the 5 established
5 established filmmakers, and they all support each other. And so it's about a community building films together and encouraging each other to perhaps make the kind of work that they wouldn't normally, and be a bit brave about spreading their wings. And the budgets are our budgets are going to be £1.5 million. So it's small, that's not much. You know, on average at the moment, an average feature debut or second or third film that we're funding ranges between £2.5 million and up to about 5, I would say. Our debuts are 2.5 to 3.5 on average £1 million. So this is a small budget.
So why do you think the Danes revived it at this time in the world? Because obviously there's just so much. There's so many films now that are just remakes of superhero films, and you know the kind of global film industry is dying. So like why, so that was really negative, but like why do you think they chose now? Was it a timing on that timeline, or was it something else?
Well, it was 30 years since the original, and so I guess they were probably considering, do we mark this anniversary? What do we do? And then, yeah, I don't know the full origin story. I think they just felt that maybe it's time for something else. Let's reboot this. Let's write a new manifesto. And I think it sparked a lot of others. You know, so the Germans launched in Cannes, and that's led by Tong Titfer's company, who's a big, very well-known German filmmaker who's worked in Hollywood with the Wachowski sisters, etc. I think there's lots of people who just felt like, God, I could really do with going back to basics and reclaiming my love. And I think, you know, there's something about, God, we're all like, you know, being fracked. We're humans who've been fracked by technology and the tech bros, and, you know, we're all addicted to devices. We're all being scraped for our data. I think there is something about the kind of principles that speaks to people, not just from the making. So we're very interested in not just having a manifesto for the making, but also how we show the films, i.e. cinema works in a scarcity model. So the more that you can do something special that brings people in person to the cinema, I think we're all very passionate about that, whilst recognising that cinema's got expensive and there are economic barriers and there are access barriers. Like, we're thinking about what can we do about all of that makes what we make accessible to everyone and gives everyone, or as many people as possible, something special that helps them be part of it too. I bring the audience into the conversation.
You mentioned there were 5 directors. Can you say who you're working with?
No, not yet, but I will. They're the creme de la creme of British filmmaking, and they're a cross generation as well. So yeah, we're just putting all our principles together, and
we'll try and find out. Do you think it's going to have like a bit of a knock-on effect on broader cinema then, this movement, as it has done before?
I hope so. I mean, I think lots of people in the industry are sort of desperate for a bit of a rethink. Budgets have got high. That's a good thing because it means people are being paid properly, but also it means that the films are very hard to then make work and make money back. That doesn't matter to public funds, but it does matter to private equity players and distributors and sales agents, all the other people in the ecosystem. And I think movements in art are exciting. They've always, you know, throughout the ages, kind of with certain populations and certain audiences sparked something, and there's something exciting about that, I think. And I think manifestos are also make people really creative, or rather rules, because they're not being able to do something makes you very inventive and creative. There's something about when the sky's the limit, it's like you look at loads of studio films, like the possibilities are endless, and then the work's kind of a bit like blah. You know, whereas the more you can't do something, in my experience, the more inventive and creative you become. And that's why filmmakers love rules.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So before I open up to questions, what advice would you give to someone trying to break into the industry at this moment in time?
I mean, I do think there's something to be said for being able to make work where you are and not wait for permission. There is something about that I would just say, just keep going. If you have a burning story to tell, do it by any means necessary, even if it's just for yourself to practice, and then find your collaborators. And I really advocate for going on workshops, labs. Like, we actually fund labs, so we fund a whole range of it's the Creative Challenge Fund, and there are about 10, 12 labs a year that we fund, which are range from being for producers putting a slate together, or for debut writers and directors. Like, there's a whole range of them. Some are for more established genre makers, for instance. Like, they each have a different kind of key tone, and that was a way for us to decentralize funding, so you don't just need to come to us for development. You can go to other people organising and deciding what films and filmmakers get picked. They're specifically project development, and you get paid to go on them as well, so you get money to develop your project. So I would just say, look at all of those options. Like, and a lot of places like that, they're not all for people who come through traditional routes either. And that's often where you find your people. It's about finding collaborators. Finding collaborators is a bit like dating. You really need to know, you need to kind of go through a bit of a cast list, you know, try people out, see movies together. Like, you have to kind of find your people.
That's a great idea. Speed dating collaborator night.
Yeah, it really can help, actually, because you can really spark by one thing that someone says, or someone can just throw you off by going, my favourite film is Jaws, and like, you love whatever, you know, Jean Dillman, you know, like, you're probably not a great match, but maybe you are, actually. Like, the reverse can work too. And so I would say, yeah, that you just never know where you're going to find your people either, because it's not always about taste either. Sometimes it's about having a kind of balance of skills. Like, often I find writers are often not really the most, you know, they're a bit backward in coming forward, and often you need a producer who's really going to lift them up. And directors are often like better at pitching, but not always. Like, you might just really find that you need a different mix of people dependent on the project as well. And so you just have to keep going. That's always what I needed to do to find my collaborators, because I spent a lot of my time as a producer freelance trying to find those people that I was excited by, and I met them in all kinds of places.
Where's the weirdest place?
Oh God, a weird place. No, they weren't really that weird. They were generally like, you know, festivals on the whole, like meeting people at festivals, or just people recommending others generally. Like, that was always the best. You know, meet my friend because I think you'll really like them, or you're really similar and I think your taste is similar. And I just watch as much as possible as well, like, have your finger on the pulse. And I think having a specialism is a good thing. Like, have a focus. If you really know what you want to make, like, be clear what's your signature piece. Being a generalist is quite hard, I'd say. It's hard to kind of focus down on, like whenever we look at applications where like the range of work is like a horror short and a comedy short and then a drama, and then we're looking at something that's not really any of those things like that.
Not like a consistent tone. Throughout.
Yeah, exactly. Like what I always love the idea of what's coming into the world through you. You know, what, like often there is a consistent story or theme, or you know, you may not identify that entirely at the beginning, but it may come to you. And like, what are you interested in? What is your voice? Yeah, who do you care about?
And doesn't always necessarily have to be when you're in your 20s?
No, not
like that voice comes.
No, not at all.
Great. Guys, we're going to open up for questions. So please raise one's hand. Yes, at the back. Do you want just a quick one? Do you want him on the mic?
I think we should be able to pick it up.
I'm sure we can hear you.
Hi, mate. Thank you. That was fantastic. Over the last few years, there's been a lot of data, studies, articles about how working class people are actually being pushed out of creative industries and the arts, not just film, but theatre, music, etc. I was wondering your thoughts on that, and perhaps how it intersects with film still remaining egalitarian.
Yeah, I mean, without doubt, if you've not got a route through education, or when you leave education, you know, there are places like the BFI actually that fund incredible spaces for like 16 to 18-year-olds to kind of practice filmmaking the first time. If we don't consistently fund activities like that, where there is always something for you wherever you come from, then yeah, there's no ladder. There has to be a pathway that isn't just for people who can just afford it. And that also, even staying in the industry can be hard. You can be funded at the beginning of your career because there's a fair bit of money for debuts or like your first or second early piece of work, and then actually being able to afford to stay in the industry is a massive challenge for working class people. You know, I maxed out all my credit cards because I don't have any family money or any kind of safety net. That wasn't particularly bright, but you know, it is what it is. I wouldn't recommend doing that. But like, I'd won an Oscar at the point that I like then got into massive amounts of debt, because then you go, okay, I'm having success on paper, but not materially, so I'm going to invest in myself. And you know, there is just no easy way of doing it. Like the advice I would say is just, it's a surprise when you actually manage to get a full-time gig in the industry that actually pays you properly. I always found that. I always had to have a side hustle, and that doesn't make it right, but it just is what it is. And if you really need to be doing it, like, you'll find a way. And that probably sounds a bit kind of pat, but you know, that again, like, that's why having a kind of range of collaborators, like, find a rich kid who can, like, you know,
Nepo adjacent,
pay for certain things, you know, like, actually, I managed to do that once. It worked for a short amount of time.
That's such good advice.
They're quite rare. I never really just generally met loads of rich kids, but you know, they do that again, like, having a wide circle of people. Like, often what you do find is, like, there'll be like rich kids who are producers who actually have got an interesting eye for talent and do want to take risks, so you can find a kind of interesting blend. But yeah, I mean, it's such a bigger conversation about who gets access. You know, that's why I think, you know, just like, actually on one basic level, buy lottery tickets, because you know what, lottery money is good cause funding, and it goes to this kind of program, this kind of work. That's exactly what it's there for. It's good cause funding. You know, no, we wouldn't have any sports unless without lottery funding. We'd barely have any arts without lottery funding. And, you know, that's an interesting thing. Like, that's why I always see it as our job to take risks, because our money can do that. We've also got another fund at the BFI, just so you know, which is called the Global Screen Fund, and that money is different. That's for minority UK productions, and that's got a business driver to it. It's for minority UK co-productions, so that UK co-producers are attractive to majority European funds or projects from all over the world, basically, so that we can also draw in work from elsewhere and have something else to say about, or rather have a different range of collaborators than just the ones that we find here. So, and that's particularly the drivers for that, for those funds are, it's about business. So even knowing where your project sits is helpful. Like, have you got a business case in which go to certain funds like the Global Screen Fund? If it's much more cultural funding you need, then it's us. I went round the houses with that answer.
I'm going to move our talks to Mayfair so that we can potentially go out after and find some...
There you go. Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes?
So I've watched Lollipop, and it's got such huge social impact, and I know that BFI sort of honour that. Is that something you look in most applications or most of the projects that you look for? Are you looking for there to be charities attached, or those sort of, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yep, social impact. Yeah, we do think about that. It's not criteria, so we would analyse that, kind of assess that in the round. So that would be more around looking at kind of authenticity. So for instance, with Lollipop, Daisy May Hudson has got an incredible process. She calls it non-extractive, which I really like and would underscore, i.e. that is a practice of telling real stories that have authentic voices within them without mining real people's stories and not kind of crediting them and thanking them and doing something about the injustice of that story. So all the way through she had a plan, and that was involving actors from Clean Break who are prison leavers, because that's the story, and having impact producers and campaigns around it. Like, they went to the House of Commons with the Justice Secretary to talk about the theme of that film, which was that film becomes such an amazing piece of evidence of the injustice of women leaving prison, trying to reclaim the custody of their children and not being able to do so because they need to have a home to do it, and it's just this horrid cycle of injustice. So that's not essential, but we would look at who's telling the story. We would look at, okay, if you're telling this story, what's your qualification to do so? Qualification, I would put in inverted commas. But then who have you got around you to do that? Who are the partners? Not everyone has those, so we would not necessarily mark you down for that. We would just like to see that you've thought about it and that you'll work to bring them to the table. But you can always tell people who are extractive and just want to mine stories that aren't really their own. We got quite good at avoiding those. Yeah, authentic lived experience is a really important part of what we do. And we have actually, I forgot to say, we have an access and inclusion manager, and part of their job is to look at that and go, okay, I think you might need some support here. Like, what are we doing to give access to people with the lived experience of this story, and how might we help them get a job, and B, have something beyond this that gives them a career direction that maybe they didn't expect otherwise. And so that might be a small number of people that you're changing their lives. Like, that's our job too, and which we would help the filmmakers to do. But not every film necessarily has to have that, but a lot of our films do, for sure.
Thank you. Any more?
Hello.
Hello.
It's kind of a two-part question. First one, you mentioned different labs Do you have like a number that you would recommend to go to, and any workshops, anything like that? And then the second question is, how did you get the cow to blow up in 6-shooter?
Quite disparate questions there. So the labs, actually, if you go to BFI Network, there should be a labs page. So it's everything from Network at LFF is a really good program, which is for people who are moving from shorts to features, and that's for producers, directors, writers. I think they're just about to do a call out. So that means you get accreditation in LFF and loads of amazing sessions and access to screenings, not just British filmmakers, but the filmmakers from all over the world who are coming to LFF. So 100% would underscore that. I think that's about to announce a call out. If you go to BFI Network, you'll see all of the upcoming labs. We're just about to launch about 8 or 9 coming up. Screen Skills Fund labs. Then there are things like the Sean Connery lab that BBC Screen Scotland do, which I don't think it's just for Scottish filmmakers. I think it's wider than that, and you get to make a short, a higher budget short. Future Takes is our higher budget short film scheme, so look out for that call. That will be later this year. That's for people who've already got 1 or 2 shorts and want to make something that's a kind of next piece of work on your way to longer form. That's probably it. I would say things like ERV are really good for producers. There's lots of European funds. ACE is really good also for producers, but writers and directors can be part of those. Like, look at things like Creative Europe. Not all of them are available to Brits, annoyingly, because we stupidly left Europe. We won't dwell on that bit. But some of them are. They're all, I really, really advocate for like residencies, workshops, as many of those as you can. Like, just keep doing your own kind of research on it, and because those programs can be super helpful. Some of them are about finding your collaborators, some of them are project specific. How do we blow up the cow? The best story actually behind that cow in 6-shooter was that she was a former show cow. So the real cow was a show cow. I didn't even know there was such a thing. So she was like a supermodel of cows, but she was retired. And that morning when the farmer had washed her and brushed her down, and they, you know, the Frisians, they paint the black on them. The show cows they highlight the black and the white. They kind of dye them, and they sort of do makeup on them. And she got really excited that morning because she hadn't shown in many years, and so she knew that she was going to do something special. So I always thought that was just the sweetest story, that for one day she knew she didn't know she was going on camera, and she certainly didn't know she was going to be blown up on screen anyway. But I always thought that was just the cutest story. It's a bit more interesting than how we blew it up, if you don't mind me diverting. She was called Daisy as well.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Sorry, how do you fund? Regarding the labs, do you fund anything which is not entirely live action, such as CGI, animation, or mixed media? You mentioned the immersive fund, but I didn't catch that. Would you mind?
Yes. Thank you for asking. So we just opened the screen expanded screen, sorry. So that is for immersive works and of all kinds of, however you define immersive, basically. And then, so i.e. kind of headset or installation, not anything that's too much veering towards live theatre, because often immersive theatre is not fully cinema enough for us. So there are definitions, like Arts Council fund immersive as well. So if you look at our definition to make sure it fits, so that's production funding. And then yes, the labs, we do we do animation specific labs and immersive specific labs. So if you just, maybe what I'll do is I'll share with you, Sydney, and then you can just post about that, so you just know where to sign up for upcoming stuff. Yeah, and you get money to go on those, so they are really good labs. They're all free, and you get paid for your project to be developed.
Lovely. Any more questions? Glorious. Well, thank you, everyone. I wanted to float an idea of, because I'm thinking about funding, and I know it's really hard to get funding. And I thought that you could do a documentary called Searching for Sugar Daddy, and then it could be it's like the process of you trying to get funding, but also making a documentary at the same time.
Sure, go for it.
It just came to me.
Probably a TV series, I imagine. Yeah,
Not yet.
Yeah,
Not yet.
could be. Okay.
Anyway, thank you everyone so much for coming. It's been really lovely to have you all here on a Monday evening, and stick around for a drink. And thank you so much to Mia Bays.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.